Welcome back, dosto, to your favorite YouTube channel, where we break down important questions and answers that are super helpful for your staff exams and other competitive defense-related tests. We've already covered some key questions from important biographies, and today, we continue with part 2 of Field Marshal K.M. Cariappa's biography written by C.B. Khanduri. Dosto, after carefully studying the book, we've handpicked 44 most important questions. So you don't have to flip a single page, we've done the hard work for you. We're also updating the May month current affairs. And as you know, May is a hot zone when it comes to defense and warfare topics. You can easily expect 2-3 direct questions from May in your upcoming exams. So don't miss out. If you haven't subscribed yet, abhi kar lo, because no other channel gives you such complete and exam-targeted current affairs and Q&A content. So without wasting any time, let's jump into today's journey, part 2 of the legendary Field Marshal Cariappa's story. We'll be discussing 8 very important questions today. And yes, if you haven't watched part 1, make sure to go check it out later. It's packed with useful stuff. Now, let's begin with today's question number 1, which states, Question 1. The Indianization of the British Indian Army was neither swift nor smooth. It was a contested journey marked by resistance, resilience, and reform. Critically examine the process of Indianization of the officer cadre in the Indian Army before independence. Discuss the institutional, political, and social challenges involved, and evaluate how early Indian officers like K.M. Cariappa navigated and influenced this transformative phase. In your answer, comment on the significance of initiatives like the Sandhurst Route, RIMC, IMA, and the 8-unit scheme. To answer this, let's start with the core problem, the colonial mindset and institutional barriers British control over the Indian Army. Even till 1947, top posts were reserved for British officers. After the revolt of 1857, the British became deeply suspicious of Indian soldiers. As a result, Indians were not trusted with high ranks. The highest position they could reach was a Viceroy's Commissioned Officer, VCO, which was still under British command. Even after World War I, when Indian soldiers fought bravely, the British still didn't let them lead. Only 9 Indians received the King's Commission, and most were in non-combat roles like medical services. So clearly, the system was rigged against Indian leadership. Next is 2. Political pressure and the rise of nationalism. Now, the winds of change started blowing after WWI. Indian nationalists demanded that Indians should lead their own army and control the defense budget. The Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, 1918, gave some hope, but they were slow and largely symbolic. Reformers like Sir K.G. Gupta and P.S. Shivaswamy Iyer criticized the army's resist structure. They argued that the army should exist to defend India, not to serve the British Empire's imperial goals. Next, we will discuss about key steps in the Indianization journey. Let's now look at the milestones that slowly open the doors for Indian officers. A. Sandhurst Route, the first attempt. In the 1920s, 10 seats per year were given to Indians at the Royal Military College, Sandhurst in the UK. But most Indian cadets struggled because they had no proper training beforehand. Still, trailblazers like Cariappa didn't give up and earned their King's Commission. B. RIMC, preparing the ground. To solve the training gap, the British founded the Prince of Wales Royal Indian Military College, RIMC, in 1922. Officers like Cariappa and Iskandar Mirza came from here. RIMC gave young Indians the academic and military background they needed for Sandhurst. C. IMA, a game changer. In 1932, India got its own officer training institute, the Indian Military Academy, IMA, in Dehradun. This was a turning point. Training was now happening on Indian soil, with an Indian focus. It boosted morale and showed that India was ready to lead. D. The 8-unit scheme. In 1923, Lord Rawlinson introduced a plan to create 8 Indian-led units. This included Cariappa's regiment, the 17th Rajput. The plan was symbolic and slow, but it planted the seed for Indian leadership in combat roles. E. The Indian Sandhurst Committee, 1925. Led by Major General Sir Andrew Skene, this committee pushed for more Indian entries, even in artillery and air force. This led to more seats and eventually the creation of the IMA. But again, the British dragged their feet and avoided deadlines. 4. Racism and social discrimination. Now let's talk about social challenges. Even after proving themselves, Indian officers were excluded from mess halls, denied promotions, and left out of key decisions. During World War II, even capable officers like Cariappa were kept away from important operations just because of their race. There was a clear glass ceiling, and it didn't start breaking until just before independence. 5. Cariappa, the man who broke barriers. Field Marshal Cariappa played a pivotal role in this entire transformation. He trained at R.I.M.C and Sandhurst, but outperformed expectations. He even stood up against racism at Staff College, Quetta. He later commanded Indian troops, proved his leadership at places like the Bannu frontier, and worked behind the scenes to reform the army during Partition. Cariappa showed that Indians could lead with honor and efficiency. Dosto, why these initiatives mattered? Let's quickly recap the importance of these reforms. 1. Sandhurst opened the door, but was too limited. 2. R.I.M.C built the foundation for success. 3. IMA brought pride and professionalism to Indian soil. 4. 8-unit scheme gave Indians their first real leadership roles. Each one added a brick to the foundation of an independent Indian army. Final outcome, a national army, not a colonial one. The journey of Indianization was slow, filled with resistance, and shaped by racial bias. But thanks to pioneers like Cariappa, India was able to transform the army from a colonial tool into a national force. This was an essential step in India's path to independence and sovereignty. And that wraps up question 1, a deep look into how officers like Field Marshal Cariappa changed the course of Indian military history. Dosto, if you're preparing for defense exams, this isn't just history. It's the story of leadership, struggle, and national pride. Moving on to next question. That is question number 2. Which states Brigadier, later Field Marshal, K.M. Cariappa was a resolute advocate of complete Indianization and military modernization while upholding professional standards and institutional integrity. His tenure on the Reorganization Committee showcased bold reformist ideas, blending tradition, foresight, and national pride. Discuss the following. A. How did Brig Cariappa uphold professional discipline and confront institutional racism within the colonial military system? B. What were his efforts to integrate modern military thinking while preserving core traditions of the Indian Armed Forces? C. Which structural and organizational reforms did he propose or support as part of the Reorganization Committee? And what were their long-term implications for the Indian Army? Dosto, let's explore how one man, Brigadier K.M. Cariappa, later India's first Field Marshal, became a driving force in Indianizing the army, modernizing its structure, and preserving its traditions. We'll break this into 3 powerful themes: discipline and resistance to racism, embracing modern ideas, and deep structural reforms. A. Upholding discipline and defying racism. Brigadier Cariappa was not just a brilliant officer, he was a man of principles. 1. Even when faced with open racism, social exclusion, and career blocks, he maintained strict personal and professional discipline. 2. British officers often doubted whether Indians could lead. Cariappa didn't just disagree, he proved them wrong by action. 3. He demanded promotions based on merit, not on colonial favoritism or skin color. 4. Even when others gave in to the system, he stood strong and united other Indian officers like Major General Rudra and Sher Ali Pataudi to form a quiet resistance against discrimination. His behavior sent a message: professionalism and unity could challenge even the most rigid colonial structures. B. embracing modern military thought while honoring tradition. Cariappa was not just a soldier, he was a visionary reformer. 1. He supported the move toward mechanization, modern air power, and the development of a navy, understanding that future wars would be different. 2. He pushed for a balanced force, including infantry, armored units, airborne forces, fortress troops, and frontier defense. 3. But at the same time, he respected tradition. He ensured that legendary regiments like the Gorkha Brigade continued to preserve our military heritage. 4. He also backed logistical independence, including the use of air transport, to reduce dependency on foreign supply chains. 5. Importantly, he followed Auchinleck's futuristic ideas, which prepared India for nuclear, missile, and biological warfare. This showed his readiness to adapt to tomorrow's challenges. So, Cariappa struck the perfect balance: future-focused strategy with traditional strength. See structural reforms and their lasting impact. As a member of the reorganization committee, Cariappa didn't hold back. 1. The British proposed 50% Indianization by 1960. Cariappa flat-out rejected it. He demanded 100% Indian leadership, no compromise. 2. When some wanted to phase out Viceroy's commissioned officers, VCOs, he defended their dignity and value, wanting them reformed, not removed. 3. He opposed short-term, colonial-style planning and pushed for long-term strategies that would benefit an independent Indian army. 4. Thanks to him, the post-independence army became nationally led, professionally trained, and strong from within. Dosto, his ideas shaped today's Indian army, self-reliant, modern, and grounded in Indian values. So, what does all this tell us? Dosto, Brigadier Cariappa was more than a military leader. He was a strategist, reformer, and nationalist, all rolled into one. He upheld professionalism against racism, brought modern thinking to old systems, and built structures that would serve the nation for decades. His work didn't just impact one generation, it laid the foundation for the Indian Army as we know it today. Dosto, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you found this useful. Now, let's move to question number 3, which states, Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa's leadership during the ENA trials demonstrated a fine balance between duty, discipline, and national sentiment. Critically examine how Cariappa navigated the challenges of supporting Indianization, engaging with ENA affairs, upholding military integrity amid political pressures, and shaping the apolitical character of the Indian Army during a time of national transition. Dosto, this was a time when national emotions were running high, and every action was under a microscope. Let's break down how Cariappa managed Indianization, ENA affairs, and military values, all while protecting the future of the Indian Army. A. Supporting Indianization with integrity. Cariappa was deeply loyal to his duty under the British Crown, but he never hesitated to call out injustice. 1. He openly criticized how Indianization was moving too slowly, with British officers planning to delay full Indian leadership by 15 to 20 years. 2. Cariappa stood firm. India needed Indian leaders in the army, not symbolic representation. 3. He pushed hard for fast-track promotions and true command roles for Indians because he believed the army must reflect the soul of the nation. His message was clear. Indianization was not just policy, it was pride. B. Engagement with ENA affairs. Even as the British tried to keep Indian officers away from the ENA trials, Cariappa stepped in bravely. 1. He visited detention camps, Bahadurgarh, Red Fort, Khyber Camp, and showed empathy without losing objectivity. 2. He presided over an ENA court-martial in 1946, a major move considering how controversial the trials were. 3. What's more, he recommended clemency for Shah Nawaz, Dhillo, and Sehgal, the famous trio from Subhash Chandra Bose's ENA. 4. He even urged the British to announce a clear timeline for India's independence and allow political leaders to visit the INA prisoners. This wasn't rebellion, it was courageous diplomacy, balancing national emotions with military protocol. C. Upholding military integrity amid political pressure. Cariappa's moral compass was tested when he shook hands with an INA under trial. 1. The media exploded. Officers were furious. But Cariappa? He stayed calm and composed. 2. He explained that it was not a political gesture, but a show of respect for fellow soldiers. 3. He believed if the military didn't stand firm on integrity and professionalism, it would jeopardize civil-military relations in independent India. That moment showed his maturity as a leader. He could respect emotion without breaking discipline. D. Shaping the apolitical nature of the army. Even though Cariappa spoke with political leaders like Sharat Chandra Bose, he never crossed the line. 1. Later, when he became commander-in-chief, he made a difficult decision. He refused re-entry of INA veterans into the new Indian Army. 2. Was this a personal bias? Absolutely not. He simply believed the army must stay apolitical, professional, and united above party politics or past allegiances. His stance helped shape what we now proudly call the apolitical character of the Indian Army. Dosto, Lieutenant General. Cariappa showed us how to lead with head and heart. 1. He fought for Indianisation. 2. He respected the sacrifice of INA soldiers. 3. He never let emotions cloud professional judgment. 4. And he ensured the army remained a pillar of neutrality and national unity. Alright, let's moving on to question number 4, which states, in a time of national upheaval and partition, Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa emerged as a rare voice of foresight and unity, yet his honest warnings were often misinterpreted as threats. Critically evaluate Cariappa's role during the pre- and post-partition military transition, focusing on his warnings regarding Indianization, the misunderstanding over military unity, his efforts to preserve fraternity between divided forces, and the enduring lessons his leadership offers for civil-military relations in crisis. Dosto, our question 4 takes us into the most tense and emotional period of our past, the partition of India. Amid chaos, confusion, and bloodshed, Cariappa stood firm, a voice of unity, professionalism, and foresight. Let's break it down into 4 powerful parts so you can understand not just the facts, but the wisdom behind them. Let's begin. A. His warnings on Indianization, truth misunderstood. While in London, Cariappa made a practical observation. The Indian Army will take at least 5 years to operate fully without British officers. Now this wasn't about doubting Indian capability. It was a warning against rushing. He wanted a smooth handover, a stable force. But the media and politicians misread his honesty as pessimism or worse, as pro-British bias. In reality, he was simply saying, don't leave leadership gaps at the top. And history proved him right. The post-independence army did face transitional challenges. B. Misunderstanding over military unity, dictatorship fears. Cariappa also suggested something bold, a temporarily unified army under either Nehru or Jinnah to prevent civil war. But this suggestion was twisted and leaked by a Pakistani officer. News spread that Cariappa wanted a military dictatorship. Leaders like Liaquat Ali Khan panicked. Political backlash followed. But Cariappa quickly clarified his words to Lord Ismay and Mountbatten. He was never political, just trying to save lives and order. After this, he stayed far away from political matters and helped create an army that was truly neutral and professional. C. Preserving fraternity between divided armies. Now here's the part that'll touch your heart. Even after partition, Cariappa never stopped seeing Pakistani officers as brothers. 1. He kept in touch. 2. Exchanged letters and memories. 3. Supported sports and camaraderie across borders. During a farewell in Delhi Gymkhana Club, he said, "We have been brothers. We will always remain brothers." And during the 1965 war, When most would be angry and bitter, Cariappa walked into no man's land and asked Pakistani soldiers, "Khana milta hai? Chithi aati hai? Are you getting food? Do letters reach you?" This wasn't weakness. It was humanity in uniform. Even Pakistani President Ayub Khan later thanked him in a letter, calling him a man of grace and honor. So, what can we learn? Let's talk about lessons in civil-military balance. Field Marshal Cariappa's partition-era leadership leaves us with timeless lessons. 1. Foresight. He predicted the dangers of rushed Indianization and military chaos. 2. Integrity. Even when misunderstood, he stood by truth. 3. Empathy. He never forgot the human side of soldiering. 4. Apolitical stand. He protected the army's dignity by keeping it out of politics. In today's divided world, we need this kind of calm, clear, and courageous leadership more than ever. At last, we can say that Field Marshal Cariappa didn't just lead with strategy, he led with soul. His actions during partition show us that even in the darkest moments, it is possible to lead with compassion, clarity, and courage. So remember, dosto, defense is not just about weapons and wars. It's about values, vision, and the will to unite. Moving ahead, let us move to question number 5, which states, in the immediate aftermath of partition, Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa faced the dual burden of national duty and personal grief, yet upheld the moral and professional ideals of military leadership. Critically examine Cariappa's role as Deputy Chief of General Staff and Eastern Army Commander with reference to his warnings on Kashmir, ethical critique of partition violence, leadership under organizational stress, and his enduring message of neutrality, discipline, and humanity for the Indian Army. Let's now move into a very emotional and intense phase, right after partition. Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa wasn't just facing an external enemy, he was fighting chaos, disunity, and grief all at once. His early warning on Kashmir, ignored but accurate. On 20th September 1947, Cariappa sent a high-level warning to Army headquarters. He clearly said, Pakistan-backed tribal fighters are heading toward Kashmir. But this warning was dismissed by senior British officers, especially General Lockhart. They didn't take it seriously, and when the attack actually came, India had to scramble. This delay created tension between Lockhart and Nehru, and showed how correct Cariappa had been. He had the vision, but the system didn't listen. His honest words on partition violence, a mirror to the nation. Partition wasn't just about politics, it was a human tragedy. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, everyone suffered. The violence was heartbreaking. Cariappa didn't hide from this truth. He said something very bold. With what face can India judge war criminals when our people butcher each other? These words weren't against India, they were for India's soul. He wanted us to become a nation of morals, not just of slogans. Leading under pressure, the Eastern Command Challenge. In November 1947, Cariappa was promoted as Eastern Army Commander, based in Ranchi. The challenges were massive. Half the army still under British command. New Indian officers, some underprepared, were getting quick promotions. Supplies were missing. Coordination was poor. It was like flying a plane through a storm, with one engine failing and no radar. But Cariappa brought in stability, order, and leadership without drama, but with discipline. His style of command tough but kind. Cariappa believed in grooming, not just the uniform, but also the character of a soldier. He was known for strict standards, moral discipline, no tolerance for misconduct. But he was also human. When his aide once misplaced his ceremonial crown, Cariappa didn't shout. He just smiled and said, "Now I'm demoted to major." He led with humor, empathy, and grace, qualities we don't often associate with military leaders. A farewell message that still guides the army. Before leaving Eastern Command, Cariappa gave a message that remains relevant even today. Serve without fear or favor. Stay away from politics. Protect all citizens, even former enemies. The army must be a moral force, not just a military one. He asked officers to be neutral, show humanity, maintain discipline at all times. And that's exactly what the Indian Army became: professional, apolitical, and respected. Dosto, Cariappa didn't just wear the uniform, he honored it. In one of the most painful chapters in India's history, he stood for truth, even when it was uncomfortable; order, even in total chaos; humanity, even during war. He didn't just build an army, he built trust. Dosto, please do like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you're finding this content useful. And book your PDF if you haven't yet booked. Call on the number given on the video. Now let's us move to question number 6, which states, when Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa assumed command of the Delhi and East Punjab Command in January 1949, the military theatre in Jammu and Kashmir was fraught with logistical constraints, tactical errors, and leadership ambiguity. His approach to command, operations, and morale marked a decisive turn in the conflict. Discuss the following. A. What were the primary operational and logistical challenges Cariappa faced upon assuming command, and how did he attempt to address them? B. Describe the key military operations, example, summer offensive, undertaken under Cariappa's leadership, their objectives, outcomes, and tactical adjustments made. C. How did Cariappa's leadership style influence discipline, inter-service coordination, and civil-military relations during this phase of the Kashmir War? Dosto, in January 1949, Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa took command of the Delhi and East Punjab Command, overseeing the Kashmir front. The situation? A mess, tactical errors, logistical nightmares, and a war teetering on the edge of failure. But Cariappa stepped in and changed the game. A. Challenges on ground and how Cariappa took control. When he took over, Indian troops were badly positioned, fighting from valleys while Pakistanis held the heights. Only one road, Pathankot, supplying the entire front. Snow-blocked passes, no airlift capability for heavy supplies. Officers lacked training for mountain warfare. And worst, command was still unclear. British generals like Roy Butcher still had influence and offered weak leadership. So what did Cariappa do? 1. Fixed the tactical mess, focused on regaining the high ground. 2. Created 2 new divisions. Shri Division, led by Thimaiya. 25 Jammu and Kashmir Division, led by Atma Singh. 3. Shifted headquarters to Jammu, closer to the action, faster communication. Planned in secrecy, launched Operation Skipper and Vijay quietly to avoid leaks. B. Major operations, the Summer Offensive and more. Summer Offensive, May 1948. Goal: recapture Tithwal and Domal, key locations in North Kashmir. Indian troops made early gains, but progress slowed due to strong Pakistani artillery, difficult terrain, lack of mechanized units. To Dogra couldn't push through. Heavy guns had to be airlifted into the region. Cariappa was frustrated. He felt the push came too late. By now, regular Pakistani army units had joined the fight, making progress harder. Victories elsewhere. 1. Naushera and Jhangar. Brig Mohammad Usman led from the front. Vowed, Jhangar will be ours again. 2. Naik Jadunath Sinha, held of enemy waves, died in action, later awarded Param Veer Chakra. Cariappa himself visited front lines under fire, a major morale boost for soldiers. C. Cariappa's leadership style: disciplined, humorous, human. He demanded discipline, but not without dignity. Example: he stopped General Thimaiya from smoking in an official car, but later laughed about it with him. He wasn't afraid to be tough. When Brigadier Bikram Sinha hesitated to act in Tithwal, Cariappa ordered him directly to lead from the front. And finally, let's talk about civil-military relations and public image. Under Cariappa, Communication between military and civilian leaders improved. His headquarters shift made operations more responsive. Leaders like Sheikh Abdullah and Maharaja Hari Sinha praised him openly. Even the press called the army angels from the skies. Under Cariappa, the Indian army earned respect, trust, and credibility. Conclusion: command that rescued a war. Lieutenant General K.M. Cariappa didn't just command troops, he reclaimed control of a war that was slipping. He fixed operational flaws, boosted morale, led boldly and fairly, and helped turn the Kashmir conflict into a display of Indian resilience. A commander with a clear head, steady hand, and unshakable heart. Now move to question number 7, which states, after retiring from active service, General K.M. Cariappa transitioned into diplomacy with the same sense of honor, discipline, and national pride that had defined his military career. His tenure as High Commissioner to Australia and New Zealand reflected the ethos of a soldier-statesman representing a young republic on the global stage. Discuss the following. A. Describe Cariappa's early post-retirement phase and his decision to accept the diplomatic assignment. How did his background influence his approach to diplomacy? B. Analyze Cariappa's key initiatives and contributions as High Commissioner to Australia and New Zealand, especially in terms of supporting Indian youth, representing Indian culture, and engaging with foreign leadership. C. Evaluate the controversies surrounding Cariappa's remarks on the White Australia policy. What does his response to the incident reveal about his leadership values and long-term impact on India's international image? Dosto, when General K.M. Cariappa retired from the Indian Army in January 1953, he didn't walk away from national service, he just put on a different uniform. He exchanged his olive greens for diplomacy and once again stood tall for India. A. Early post-retirement and acceptance of diplomatic role. After retirement, Cariappa settled in Merkara, devoting himself to veterans' welfare, youth development, and writing. He rejected offers to be governor of Punjab and Assam not for lack of prestige, but because he believed in service over status. He wrote widely on the role of youth in nation building, women's participation in society, rehabilitation of ex-servicemen. Then came April 1953. Nehru appointed him High Commissioner to Australia and New Zealand. Cariappa agreed, saying, "I will serve wherever my country needs me." This wasn't just a diplomatic posting. It was a symbolic mission, India's first army chief now representing the Republic overseas. And naturally, his values, discipline, dignity, and national pride shaped his diplomatic conduct. B. Key contributions in Australia and New Zealand. 1. Dignified representation. He met dignitaries like Field Marshal William Slim and maintained strict decorum at the embassy. He told his staff, "No misbehavior, no propaganda. We represent a free India now, with honor." At a formal audience with Queen Elizabeth II, he chose to wear traditional court dress, quietly asserting cultural pride. 2. Supporting Indian students. Cariappa made special efforts to help Indian youth, help them adjust to Australian life, secure jobs and internships, encouraged self-respect regardless of caste or economic background. Many students later recalled how General Cariappa treated us like his own. 3. Cultural diplomacy. His residence, Shanti Kutir, became more than a diplomatic house. It was a hub of Indian culture and values. He built personal goodwill through cultural evenings, festive celebrations, warm interpersonal ties. This strengthened people-to-people connections far beyond official protocol. C. The White Australia policy controversy, truth with grace. The incident. During a public event, Cariappa made a pointed but polite criticism of Australia's racist White Australia policy. The media backlash was swift, both in India and Australia. But Cariappa didn't walk it back. His response: he stood firm, saying, You see a man's true colors when he's told the truth, especially a politician. It was classic Cariappa, blunt, witty, but never rude. Long-term impact. His remarks sparked debate in Australia on immigration and race. By 1963, changes began softening the policy. He is still remembered by many as the first foreign envoy to call out the injustice with courage and class. Finally, we can say, as High Commissioner, Cariappa represented a young republic with old wisdom, helped shape India's image abroad as principled, cultured, and fearless, and continued to serve the nation without a gun, but with grit. His diplomacy was never just about protocol. It was about truth, dignity, and standing tall, just as he did on the battlefield. Now, let's move on to the final segment in your series on General K.M. Cariappa, that is question number 8. Discuss the multifaceted role played by General K.M. Cariappa as India's High Commissioner to Australia and New Zealand. In your answer, highlight his diplomatic initiatives, cultural engagements, economic contributions, personal traits, and long-term impact on bilateral relations. Examine how his tenure reflected both strategic foresight and personal charisma, and assess the significance of his legacy in the context of India's post-independence foreign policy outreach. Dosto, when General K.M. Cariappa stepped into diplomacy, he didn't just represent India, he embodied it. His tenure as High Commissioner to Australia and New Zealand 1953 to 1956 was not just a posting. It was a continuation of national service, this time with a different arsenal: culture, clarity, charisma, and conviction. A. Diplomatic initiatives and strategic engagements. True ambassador in action. Cariappa embraced diplomacy with the same zeal he showed on the battlefield. He built strategic bridges with political leaders, business figures, and civic institutions. Known for his hands-on leadership, he ensured India's image abroad was one of strength, sincerity, and sovereignty. The Commonwealth Club. When he noticed Canberra lacked a decent social space, he founded the Commonwealth Club. Its open, inclusive membership, especially allowing women, was progressive for the time. When asked to name the club after himself, he refused, saying it should reflect global values, not personal glory. Standing firm for India. When Australian radio misrepresented Kashmir's history, Cariappa corrected them with firm grace. He used public broadcasts to assert India's position without escalation. A rare example of strategic messaging with statesmanship. B. Cultural and economic contributions. Promoting Indian culture. He introduced Indian philosophy, spirituality, and art to curious Western audiences. Invited gurus, artists, and musicians to tour. His events became windows into a rising India rooted in timeless wisdom. Economic diplomacy. Cariappa wasn't just cultural, he was economic-minded too. Proposed crossbreeding Indian sheep with Australian Merino, which succeeded in boosting Indian wool quality. Promoted exports, from Kashmiri carpets to handicrafts, helping create niche Indian markets in the region. Even arranged for kangaroos to be sent to Delhi Zoo, a gesture of soft diplomacy wrapped in symbolism. C. Personal traits, charisma, humor, and integrity. Cariappa was never dull. His personality itself was a diplomatic tool. Once introduced his Sikh driver as the Prince of Nabha at a party, breaking the ice with charm. When a local mistook him for a truck driver, he played along with a laugh, winning hearts with humility. He also wrote to Nehru, expressing concern about growing communist influence in India, urging, "Let India remain Indian, rooted in democracy, not ideology." That was Cariappa, always honest, always India first. D. Support for youth and community engagement. He took special care of Indian students abroad, helped them find work, adjust to life, and maintain Indian values. Never judged by caste or background. To him, all were India's future ambassadors. He personally preserved Indian war memorials, sometimes cleaning them himself. In Papua New Guinea, he once politely declined a marriage proposal from a tribal woman with wit, not offense. Legacy and long-term impact. His legacy lasted far beyond his posting. Decades later, TV programs and cultural exchanges he initiated were still active. When he returned in 1980, he received a hero's welcome. His personal diplomacy laid the moral and emotional groundwork for future ties between India and the region. In 1986, when Cariappa was made Field Marshal, Australian leaders sent warm congratulations, a symbol of enduring respect. As R.K. Nehru once said, visiting Cariappa felt like a pilgrimage to a man who stood for everything India aspired to be. Dosto, Cariappa's diplomatic mission was not just protocol, it was personal, principled, and powerful. He fused military discipline with cultural warmth, economic foresight with spiritual openness, global outreach with national identity. In Australia and New Zealand, General Cariappa proved that a soldier's duty never ends, it just changes terrain. His legacy? An India abroad that was confident, compassionate, and credible, just like the man who represented her. Here, we come an end of this part. Dosto, ab waqt hai action ka. Grab your PDF copy of this complete question and set, ready for revision, quick recall, and full confidence in the exam. Already, hundreds have subscribed and are feeling more prepared and confident. और आप भी उसी सफर का हिस्सा बनिए. Our channel is committed to providing you the best with clarity, authenticity, and smart preparation strategies. So prepare well, stay focused, and most importantly, stay tuned, dosto. Jai Hind.